My name is Amir Naiberg. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor and CEO of UCLA's Technology Development Group. Welcome to our 13th annual UCLA MedTech Conference. This year, it is part of the LABEST Week, followed by tomorrow's LABEST Bioscience Conference. Over the past 5 years, MedTech industry has evolved rapidly, from devices and catheters to software, telehealth, and AI. Today's sessions will highlight how these trends are transforming the industry, transforming care, and creating new challenges and opportunities. One of those challenges is commercialization. FDA approval is no longer the goal line, is no longer the end result, and certainly does not guarantee success. Our CEO panel will dive into this reality later today. KDG is proud to host this conference as part of our mission to translate innovation, academic innovation, into real-world impact. But we're also very mindful that academic research, the foundation of innovation, is under significant stress. That's why now, more than ever, we must show decision makers the value of research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Please join us to our MedTech Showcase later today that will highlight recent achievements in this area. And with that, it's my great honor to introduce a good friend. He is a true leader in academic medicine and a generous supporter of this conference. Dr. Shivkumar is a globally respected physician scientist, the inaugural director of the UCLA Cardiac Arrhythmia Center, and the director and chief of cardiovascular interventional programs at UCLA. Please join me in welcome Dr. Shivkumar.
Thank you so much, Amir, for that kind introduction. Like I said, if my parents were alive, they would smile, and my wife still wouldn't believe that. But thank you so much, Amir. So this is the first time that the Technology Development Group has combined a MedTech Day along with the usual Biosciences Day that LABEST has done. And as a sort of a kickoff for this integrated conference, it's a rare honor and a privilege for me to introduce one of the most remarkable executives in the world of MedTech in the world today, and that is Lisa Earnhardt. We're going to be hearing from her about her career journey and something that's going to be very inspiring for the diverse audience that we have over here, all the way from students to physicians, physician scientists, and executives. I can go over a sort of a academic review of her CV, which doesn't serve a great purpose, except to say that, of course, she has topped everything that she has touched. Her background is actually engineering. She went to engineering school and subsequently went on to get a degree in business. And of course, she's had links with all the great universities in America, which includes Northwestern and Stanford. But what is really more important is Lisa has, when you talk to executives, and I've known people over the past 2 decades in this field, every single person would refer to her as an executive's executive. And if you talk to even the junior most people in the company, they have some way of having linked to something that Lisa has done that has inspired their careers. Therefore, I would say that in my own interactions with her, I've been amazed by her ability to connect with people, bring teams together, and her current position is one of the highest positions as a medical executive in the world of business in the entire world today. She's the senior vice president of Abbott, all medical devices. Think of this, right? Literally hundreds of thousands of patients are going to have interventions that use devices that came through her group and people who have reported to her and people she has led. So I would say that Lisa represents the very best of MedTech and people who help us in the world of medicine, help millions of people. It's through MedTech and biotech industry that we're able to do that. And without much further ado, I'd like to invite Lisa to come address us and inspire us. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Well, good morning. Happy to be here with you all. Thank you, Dr. Shivkumar, for such a kind introduction. I call him Shiv. So, and I can only call him that at a personal level because I first met Dr. Shivkumar over how many years ago? It was 20 some odd years ago. When he was just coming right out of his fellowship here at UCLA and landed at University of Iowa. And I, at the time, was running a region in cardiac rhythm management. So we did things like pacemakers and defibrillators. And I showed up at University of Iowa. He was doing a pacemaker, and I was there to help support his case. And I recognized at that very moment that he was going to go on to do amazing things, and look at all that he has done here in partnership with all of you here at UCLA. So we've come a long way together, and the field of medtech certainly has. So I've had the great pleasure of being at really big companies. So I started my career out of business school at Guidant. And then I went to a startup, employee number 14, called Intersect ENT. And we could tell, I could tell a few stories there, and maybe I'll weave some of those in over the course of my my chat here. And then I ended up back at Abbott just about 6 years ago. So I've seen all different stages of medtech innovation. And one thing's for sure, innovation still is the lifeblood of our industry. To the extent that we all fuel innovation, we have an opportunity to make a huge impact in the world today. Literally millions of millions of people who rely on technologies that this team either works on today, that will invent in the future, or who ultimately will commercialize and impact. So I thought I would just provide some comments around sort of what's happening more broadly. I'm going to avoid DC altogether this morning, so hopefully you appreciate that. But there's no question it's a dynamic time, and but even putting aside like today's sort of global political situation, it's a challenging time in healthcare. So as I think about, I'm an internal optimist, so I'm always glass half full, but I'm also a realist, and I recognize that we are facing some incredibly daunting challenges in healthcare. Starts first with the aging population. So by 2030, 1 out of 6 adults will be over the age of 60 on the planet. By 2050, that will represent about 2.5 billion people over the age of 60s where your healthcare needs start to really increase. So tremendous, tremendous impact on the work that we need to do today to be able to prepare for the aging population. There is no question chronic disease is eminently starting to, crumble our healthcare system. And I think about things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes. Those are 2 areas that I work in today at Abbott. They represent over 70% of the deaths. 70%. We can and must do better in helping change that curve. And the healthcare worker shortage. So I think this came to its peak during the pandemic, but the ground was laid for this years ago. So this is something we were talking about 10 years ago about like, hey, what's happening here? The needs are growing. There aren't as many people going into healthcare. And oh, by the way, let's say by 2030, I think WHO is saying that, WHO is saying, hey, we'll be short about 10 or 11 million healthcare workers. How is that going to work? How are we going to be able to lead through the burdens of healthcare today? So while it did show acute issues in the pandemic, it is something that is very, very real today. The good news is that you're all in this room. So you at least are committing at least a day, maybe a couple of days, maybe your career, somewhere in between probably, to really make an impact in healthcare and really through technology. So I think we have a tremendous opportunity to make a real difference in the work that we do. And technology is going to help solve some of the big problems. I know this morning there's a discussion around the role of telehealth and remote care. This is probably one of the few silver linings that came out of the pandemic. And that was the fact that we all got comfortable seeing our physicians or seeing healthcare providers remotely. And I think the role of remote monitoring and remote patient care is tremendous. If you think about meeting people where they are, when they need to, keeping them literally and quite figuratively out of the hospital. Tremendous impact. I think about AI, and it wouldn't be a day on MedTech if we didn't talk about AI. And I know there's a session this afternoon just dedicated to that. But we're seeing it today in healthcare. We're seeing it, more so, I would say, at this point where it's being practiced routinely is on the administrative side of healthcare. Some of the back office things, some of the charting, the things that are always already taking up a lot of time for physicians and nurses and healthcare providers. We're starting to see that now, some of that work being alleviated so clinicians can do the work that they were trained to do. But that is just the tip of the iceberg. So there's so much more potential in AI as it relates to streamlining workflow, as it relates to changing how we diagnose and identify patients, ideally earlier in their disease progression, so we can change the course of their treatment, change the course of their health. And then it's things like it's being utilized in procedures. So there's just so much ability to, and the world is really our oyster. I think we were just saying, like, the AI used in healthcare is at its worst today, and it's going to get better every day for the next several decades. So what tremendous potential we all have. But it will take all of us to be able to and commit to really make a difference here. Another trend, which I think is a really positive thing, is the consumerization of healthcare. All of us really owning our healthcare the way that we own our financial budget or the way that we own other aspects of our life. How many of you took a self-test for COVID in the last 3 years? Yeah, pretty much everyone, right? Who would have thought we would be testing at home for really anything, right? I mean, maybe a pregnancy test for some of the females in the room, maybe a flu test, especially outside of the country. But there's so much potential for all of us to become even more engaged. And that's just one small example. Look here. So this is a person with diabetes who actually is managing their care using what's called a continuous glucose monitor. So historically, to track your glucose, you needed to prick your finger multiple times a day, measure your sugar levels, and then adjust your nutrition, your insulin, maybe go for a walk to help control your glucose levels. Now we're able to do that continuously using a small sensor that's placed on the back of your arm that it measures your glucose and automatically streams it to your phone every minute, 24/7. Life-changing for people with diabetes. So now we can actually predict when their sugars may be going low, and alert patients to say, hey, do this, do that. And now we're actually taking the same technology, which I have the leading glucose monitor in my portfolio. It's called Freestyle Libre. So there are 7 million people in the world today who rely on that to help manage their diabetes. So just that one product, tremendous impact. However, as I tell my team, there's over 500 million people in the globe with diabetes. So they really are just scratching the surface. So I give them a high 4 because we made tremendous progress. It probably, arguably, could be one of the most successful medical devices just in terms of widespread use, the impact on healthcare, keeping patients out of the hospital, keeping them healthy, helping them live their best lives. But there's so much work to do to be able to drive access. We've actually now leveraged that same technology and are offering it for consumers. So actually, this photo is not someone with diabetes. It's actually someone who is just helping to understand the language of their body, i.e. lingo. So they're doing that by measuring glucose and saying, hey, what foods work for me? Maybe banana isn't what I should start my day with. Maybe I should have eggs instead. And so it literally is giving you tips and tricks based on your nutrition, based on your exercise or lack thereof, based on your stress levels. So it helps you live your best life, helps to really have personalized, customizable recommendations to say, hey, this is how you can help keep your energy level stable and go through your day and sort of get the most out of it. So it has been personally life-changing for me because I used to have those proverbial bonks or head down in the afternoon where I try to go and find the closest coffee maker to give myself a little bit of boost. And it's amazing just managing my glucose, keeping it steady, what an impact that has had for me, both on my energy level throughout the day and my sleep at night, which I'm realizing as one of those part of the aging population has just gotten worse and worse. And to that end, did you know that 1 out of every 3 people in the country wear some sort of watch, smartwatch, fitness tracker? All right, how many of you guys are wearing a fitness tracker and some other biowearable? Yeah, I'm talking to the zealots here, right? Right here, I've got my watch, I have my Oura ring, and oh, by the way, I have 3 on because I have my lingo. But think of this, think of all the biometrics, think of all of this, and think of what we can do in terms of empowering consumers really to manage their own health, giving the information that they need, translating into insights so they can take action. So that is what has me positive around how we're going to be able to address some of the burdens we have in healthcare, whether it be aging or chronic disease. So this all comes to the fact that we need you and we need innovation more than ever. So when we were talking in prep for today, just talking about like, hey, Lisa, you've done a lot of different things. You've been in big companies, you've been at small companies. What are some of the themes that you've utilized in your leadership roles throughout? And so what I thought I'd do is just share some of my lessons learned. And boy, have I learned some lessons. Not have always been straightforward as much as you can sometimes look, as you say, look at my LinkedIn profile or my CV and everything seems to be a straight line. Oh, it wasn't. I think about early on, my early days at Intersect ENT. So I had been running a division at Boston Scientific. It was a cardiac surgery business. So going along my merry way, happy big business, ended up making the move into the startup world because I recognize so much of innovation in medtech comes from the startup arena, comes from entrepreneurs. And I was like, hey, I want in. I want to be able to experience that. And so I ended up making a leap of faith and took over for the founder of a really small startup that was developing a drug-eluting bioresorbable stent. So it sounds familiar, right? Drug-eluting stents are used every day in millions every year to help people with their coronaries. We were leveraging similar technologies, but we were putting it in the sinuses. So as I think about when I started, like, will it work? Can we make it? Will anyone buy it? There are a few things we needed to demonstrate. But I think about early on, a difficult lesson, and my lesson here is naivete. It can be a blessing because I started in March of 2008, realized I had about 90 days of cash, and my job number 1 was to raise our Series B financing. What I didn't fully recognize is we had to raise our Series A. We had gone back to those same investors for our Series A prime. We had taken on venture debt, which I learned became really vulture capitalism, not venture debt. It was pretty draconian terms. And oh, by the way, we only had 3 months worth of cash, right? That was a good learning for me. So I didn't know what I was doing. I very quickly used my network, asked a lot of questions. But once again, that's where it was naivete played to me because I'm not sure I would have taken that job if I had known what I would need to do. So some of my lessons along the way. So I always say it starts and ends with a customer and patient. If you do what's right for the customer and you do what's right for the patient, the rest will follow. And whether you're at a small company, you're still innovating on the bench, whether you're in my role where I have, 45,000 people who come to work on behalf every day in medical devices at Abbott, the most important thing we can do is serve our customers. And we help them and we make a difference in the world. And so one of the things I do still from my early days is I used to spend time in the cath lab in the OR with the likes of Dr. Shivkumar. I still get out and about and I still spend time with physicians and customers, administratives, thought leaders, scientific sessions, and really trying to understand what the needs are. So first and foremost, most important thing to make sure. And then by all of these interactions, really listening. I recognize my job now is much less telling. I'm not in my role because I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I know exactly what I don't know, which is a lot. And I just make sure I surround myself with a lot of amazing people who can help together do what we need to do. But I would say the one skill I have really honed over the years is listening. I think God gave you one mouth and two ears for a reason, right? So that's so important. It's not just listening, though. It's also watching. And that's one thing I recognize is oftentimes in healthcare, when you talk to healthcare providers, physicians, etc., they may tell you what their problems are, but oftentimes you need to observe them, really getting it immersed and really understanding what their needs are individually, and then also listening in terms of what's happening in the market. What are some of the signals I'm picking up? What are the trends? Because we want to understand not just where you are today, but where you go in the future. So I think that listening skill and asking questions has become a little bit about my superpower. So I just challenge you all, just think about the role of listening in your everyday work. So to my point earlier, so in order to be successful, it's really looking to everyone here in the room. So that's why meetings like this are so important and so invaluable. Because you're able to connect and network and compare notes. And as it turns out, there's probably an engineer here and a PhD there and a business person there and a physician there. And then we've got finance folks and lawyers. And it's together. We really make up that whole ecosystem. And I think it's being not afraid to ask for help. And so, as I said before, my example with Intersect when I joined is there I was CEO. I was CEO, but I was also the front desk receptionist. I did the dishes at the end of the day. I supported cases. I did whatever I needed to do. I had never fundraised before. I had fundraised for like my local school, but I had never raised venture capital. So what did I do? I started taking folks to lunch and breakfast and coffee and ask a lot of questions about what do I do? What advice do you have? Who else should I talk to? That's always one of my closing questions is like, who else do you recommend I could talk to? Who else could I learn from? And so that was one of the first things I did. I would say on the regulatory front as well. I think at one point in my journey at Intersect, it might have been, probably the end of my first full year there. All of a sudden, we had a meeting with the FDA. It was actually the first time, despite having launched literally dozens of products in my 15-year career before this, I was going to the FDA for my first kind of in-person meeting. Other teams had always done that, but as the CEO, as a startup, that's the kind of thing you lean into when you do. So there we were going to review, kind of do a pre-review of the 510K we were going to be submitting. At the end of the day, which, by the way, just happened to be my 40th birthday. I got like the worst present ever. is that the FDA said, you know what? We don't believe this is a 510K. We believe this should be a PMA. Running a startup, not being long on either cash or resources or time, that was some tough news to hear. But what I was able to do was leverage my resources, understand, reaching out to others. So critically important. The other thing I learned, and I think the VCs I worked with at the time were so good about make me understand that you really have to focus and be incredibly disciplined. And I saw this at Intersect. I see it at Abbott today. There are so many great ideas out there. And that is fantastic. We can do anything, but we can't do everything. Right? So as I think about the ability to really focus, and as I say, one of my VCs used to say, like, you earn the right. So if you finish the clinical trial and it's a positive outcome, you earn the right to be able to think about commercialization. But before that, don't even spend time and money doing that. You haven't earned the right. So it's kind of going from lily pad to lily pad and say, what are like the 2 or the 3 things that are most important? And not being afraid to say no. And it's hard. And I have that today at Abbott. So once again, big company, a lot of big ideas. At the end of the day, I'm still having to make a lot of choices. And I can't have all home run bets that I'm placing, right? So I've got some things that are innovation that I know will deliver in a shorter amount of time with some high probability. I also have a few bets that are much longer term. For example, we just announced we were developing a balloon expandable TAVI device from scratch. So innovating within Abbott. It's like a 2030 kind of project. It's absolutely worth it because there's exactly one player, global player that has a device like that today. And we think choices are important in our healthcare system that will help us all get better. So we're making that bet. But important thing is really being crystal clear with your priorities and just relentless discipline and focus to deliver on them. All right, being prepared to pivot. I gave the example at Intersect. All of a sudden, we were down the 510K path. I started at the company and I thought I'd be launching 18 months later. Oh no, just kidding. That's going to be three years later. So we had to do a whole new pivotal trial. So that is the world of innovation, for better or for worse. That is what we're all signing up for. And just know that whatever plan you're developing is going to go out the window. But the importance still of planning and really scenario planning is critical. And I say that because sometimes you just think like, here's my plan, this is the way it's going to go, and it's not going to go. But actually taking some time to think about, like, what if the opposite were true? That's also one of my favorite questions. What if the opposite were true? What if instead of this project or this program or the healthcare system, the regulatory, the reimbursement, instead of option A, we get option B? What would need to be true to be successful if we had to pivot? So really going through that thought exercise in the work that you do, so you're prepared. So, right, prepare. Preparation is key. All right, and this is why we're all here today around sort of collaboration. I always say that healthcare is a team sport. And that we really, we can't solve the troubles that we're faced with, the burdens I talked about earlier, whether it be the aging population, the burden of chronic disease, the fact that we don't have enough healthcare workers, that, for better or for worse, we're all getting generally sicker and older. The only way we can solve this is together. And once again, that's why meetings like this are so important. That's why I see Ray sitting over there. This is meetings like AdvaMed, an organization like AdvaMed, and the MedTech conference, which is happening just down in San Diego in October. So critically important. And I really think this is a new sort of competitive advantage for folks. And I think even like a company like Abbott, and you think about like, hey, we're big enough, we can just go it alone. No. And in fact, I would say there was some time, I'm guessing at a company like Abbott, we would say like, we actually don't really make good partners, right? Because you get so big, it's hard to work with. you're having to rely on others, all of those things. But let me give you a couple of examples. And this is specifically with Freestyle Libre. So as I said, Libre, our leading device used for people with diabetes all around the globe. We have started now integrating our Libre and that data in with insulin pumps. So not just one, not but two, but a handful, and maybe it'll be two handfuls by the end of the decade, right? So they're not our products, but it's the right thing for patients, so they have choice. Then they can use multiple different insulin pumps. So, and one example I think took everyone by surprise is that there is another large conglomerate called Medtronic. Some of you may have heard of them. Some of you, in fact, may work for them. We actually penned a partnership last summer with them, with Libre and their insulin pump. And in fact, we're providing our continuous glucose monitor to them. So they can actually help sell that and support their patients who use their pump. And people would ask, like, Lisa, like, that is an unlikely marriage, right? I'm like, well, we're not married. Let's be clear. Like, maybe a little bit of dating. But we're linking arms because that's the right thing for the patient. That's the right thing for the clinician. And ultimately, it's the right thing for the healthcare system that people have those choices, right? And so an unlikely marriage, but one that I truly believe is in the best interest of physicians, patients, and the healthcare system. So kind of coming full circle to where I started. Another example of a collaboration that we just did is with Epic. So I'm sure many of you know Epic. Some of you probably use Epic. Some of you probably use Epic as the 4-letter word that it is, right? It is our, it's the predominant electronic health record that's used in healthcare systems around the globe and in the leading EHR, EMR in the U.S. And in this case, we just announced a partnership so that our Libre data can flow seamlessly through Epic, first of its kind. So first of its kind for a glucose monitor, first of its kind for a medical device. This will be game-changing. So now it's like streamlined information. So endocrinologists have clear access to their glucose data and what comes out of Libre through a system we call LibreView. Patients do, their families do, the primary care physicians do. But what if a patient ends up in the ER? Or what if they end up on the floor for something unrelated to their diabetes? But yet they still have diabetes. It's important for people who are taking care of them. Or they're on vacation and they need assistance. Like having that fully integrated in to the EHR streamlines the information, and it helps people get the care they need when they need it. And ultimately, isn't that what we're all here to do? So I just wanted to thank you all for spending your time here today. Thank you for being involved and engaged with and committed to making a difference. We have tremendous work, as I said, in the industry, but I truly believe it is a transformative time in healthcare, and MedTech is a force for good in terms of being able to solve some of the most challenging, daunting problems that we face today. So that's the optimist coming back out in me, and also the realist, because I really do believe, and the things that will be talked about over the course of the day are going to be the key to making a difference in healthcare for the decades to come. So thank you all so much. Enjoy the day.